really spoken of before. Spoken on, I should say. And that I haven't really heard too many sermons, really any that I can come to mind. I'm going to be talking about the 10 words, also known as the 10 Commandments. I don't think I've ever really heard a sermon on the 10 Commandments. I haven't given one myself. I've talked about them. But I think it's something that we should consider. Something the Lord put upon my heart, and I want to share with all of you. I want us to look, though we can only do it briefly, 10 Commandments, each one of them probably deserving of a sermon in and of itself, but I want to consider all of them today. I want to look at the commandments, and hopefully we can come away with not only a better understanding, but a clear vision of how God would have us lead our lives, because that's what the 10 Commandments are there for. They're to be the lamp to our feet, the light to our path. God's word, his law specifically, is that light. And without that light guiding the way, we walk in darkness. So without further ado, let's consider the law. And the law itself is made up of two parts, two tables, as it were. The first table deals with love to God. It is an expression to us of what love to God looks like. The second table is love to man. The second table is an expression of God's heart. The first table is an expression of our heart to God. Because God doesn't relate to himself. The first table deals with man's relation to God, how man is to love his maker. The second table is how man is to love his fellow man. And likewise, it is an expression of God's love to us, exemplified in the life of Christ. And it is that in Matthew 22, verses 37 to 40, we see Christ giving expression to this very idea of these two tables in these words. He says, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments, or tables, hang all the law and the prophets. And this is but the expression of the mind of Christ, specifically the second table. But it also includes the first table, because Christ came as a man and showed us how we are to relate to God, as well as how we're to relate to our fellow man. So he put the two together in one. And that is why Paul writes in Philippians 2:5, Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Because the mind which was in Christ Jesus was the law of God. Thy law is in my heart. I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law, he said, is within my heart. That was the expression of Christ's life. His desire, his will, was to do his Father's will. And that is the law of God. It is love to God and love to man. And love works no ill toward any. That is the fulfilling of the law. So, without further ado, let's look at the basis and foundation of the law. What is the foundation? It's given in the very opening verse, and I invite you, please do open your Bibles, because we're going to be going through a chapter, part of a chapter today. It's Exodus chapter 20. I want you to read along with me. God begins by laying the foundation of his law, the reason for the law. Why did God give the law to Israel to begin with? For this very reason. It's found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 and 2. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. What had God just done for Israel? Deliver them. Deliver them from bondage. So the law was given in response to deliverance. God had delivered them from a bondage they could not deliver themselves from. And therefore he says, I am the Lord, thy God, which have delivered thee. It was by my hand that thou wast delivered from Egypt, from that house of bondage. And I have made you free. And therefore God declares his law unto them. The foundation of that law is love. Why do we love God? Because he first loved us. Love is a response to love. That's how love works. Love is a principle of response. When you smile at someone, they tend to smile back. You frown, people tend to frown back. Love is a response. We tend to respond to stimulus, and love is a stimulus. God pours out his Spirit upon us, and our response should be love. I like to say love is not so much an action as a reaction. When we contemplate, when we meditate and think upon what God has done for us, the natural response will be love. That's why it is important for us to spend time in consideration of what God has done for you. At the end of the day, go back over your day. Think what God has done. Let God bring to your mind those things which he did for you that day, to bring gratitude into your heart, love into your heart. All too often we're unmindful of the little things that God does for us each day. But at the end of the day, I like to take a little bit of time and go over my day and think about what God has done, that my heart can be lifted in appreciation and gratitude to the one who's done all that for me. Not just the cross, but the cross is exercised every day in loving kindness and mercy and goodness and blessings that God pours out upon us every day. And we should have eyes to see them and hearts to appreciate them. It will create love in our heart. It will give us a harmony. It will strike a harmonious note in our heart with the heart of heaven. So God's foundation for his law, I delivered you. I loved you. I delivered you from a bondage you could not deliver yourself. The deliverance of the bondage from Egypt was typical of bondage to sin. And God delivers us from sin. He is the only one who can deliver us from sin. And so therefore he delivers unto us his law as a result. I have delivered you from sin. In response, love me and love your neighbor. That's why he gives us his law. So let's look at the first table of the law, the expression of love to God. We begin with verse 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So what does this commandment express? Or what is a prohibition or prohibition of?
To put other things before God.
To put other things before God. Very good. God is not here saying, well, you can have gods, just don't have them before me. It could be read that way, couldn't it? But is that what God is saying? No. What he's saying is, thou shalt have none before me. Let me be supreme in your heart. Let me be chiefest of your thoughts. Let your greatest thoughts, your most aspirational thoughts, your most loving, tender thoughts be of me. If they're of someone or something else, then there's a problem. We are breaking the first commandment. If the adoration, the chiefest affections, love and devotion of our heart are not given to God and to God alone, then we are breaking the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, because gods are what receive worship, honor from among men. And God is using common language to express to us that what is given to gods, as men give to gods, a devotion of their lives and everything that they have, men devoted to their gods. God says, thou shalt have no gods before me. All devotion, the greatest affections and love of your heart should be for me. Why? Because I delivered you from bondage. I delivered you from death, from a fate worse than death. God has delivered us. And our heart should go out in love to him. He should receive the chiefest of our affections. That's why in Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, Moses declared, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. How much? I call those little big words. They're small, but their impact upon the expression or the sentence is profound. All. How much of our heart? Does that include 99.9? It's more, isn't it? It's 100%. All thine heart, undivided, all thy soul. The soul is the life. And with all thy might, all our strength. This is what God asks from us. We think of the tithe, 10%. God does not ask for 10%. God asks for all. Because he saved all. All that you have is his. He preserved it. He saved it. He's given it to you. All that we have, all our money, all our wealth, all our possessions, he gave to us. They're all his. We tend to think of them as ours, but in reality, they are his. And the first commandment is to bring that back into perspective. It lays that foundation that God is supreme, and he is to be. He ought to be, for good reason. Matthew 10:37. This is another way of expressing the first commandment. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. This is another way of expressing the first commandment. He that loves not only mother or father, son or daughter, but anyone or anything more than God is not worthy of God. God should be chiefest and foremost in our thoughts and affections. That is the first commandment. That brings us to the second commandment. Verses 4 through 6. This is the second longest commandment of all of them. The second and the fourth are the two longest commandments given of the 10. It states, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands, that is, of generations, of them that love me and keep my commandments. So the second commandment is a twofold commandment. The first is an express prohibition against what? Image making, idol making, the making of any graven image. Now this not only includes that which is made by hand, but also that which is made by mind. We call this an image. We call this an imagination. It is what creates this. This creates this. Okay? What is priority? This takes priority over this. So really the prohibition of the second commandment is not only a prohibition of making of images, but the making of it here first. Okay? Second is a prohibition against what? Not only are we not to make graven images, but we are not to do what? Bow down nor serve them. We're not to serve other gods. We're not to bow down to other gods. We're not to acknowledge other gods nor serve them. The Lord our God alone is God in heaven above and is to be worshipped. Nothing on earth is to be made as a representation of him. And that's how all idolatry began. Men said, oh, I'm just making a representation of God. I'm not worshiping the trees. I'm not worshiping Mother Nature. I'm not worshiping the sun, or I'm not worshiping the moon. No, I'm just making a representation of God in heaven. That's why God forbade this. Nothing on earth, nothing in heaven above can represent him. Nothing. He is beyond it all. He is greater than it all. So the second commandment is a prohibition against the making of images and of serving them. And there's a reason why. I touched on idolatry being more than just the making of carved or graven or molten images, but the creating of images in the mind or heart. It is much easier to create an idol of an idea or a concept or a way of life, or to make an idol of food, to make an idol of clothes, to make an idol of our looks, and I could go on and on and on. That begins here. God is not only forbidding graven images, but the imagination, how we hold self in our heart. When we exalt self above God, that is where idolatry is created. And that's what the graven image is all about. And I have found no better explanation of it than what I'm going to share with you next. It's taken from a book entitled The Empires of the Bible. It was written by a man, Alonzo T. Jones. In there, he describes what I think to a T, what idolatry is. I'll read it to you, and you can read it off the screen. He says, every idol, every false god is of itself simply nothing. The only way in which it can possibly seem to be anything is from the imagination of its devotees. What the worshiper imagines the god to be, that is all that it is. That is all that it can be. And whatever he fears or his desires dictate, that is what he will imagine the god to be. Therefore, it is perfectly plain that every idol, every false god, is but the reflection of its devotee. It is also perfectly plain that in this reflexive way, each idolater is himself his own god. Each idolater being his own god, it is also plain that all idolatry, all false worship is but self-worship. That is idolatry. When we're making an image, we're making a god, an idol. And we can make it out of anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be graven. It can be in here. It can be in here. And this expression of what idolatry is, I think, fits it to a T. It expresses it perfectly as far as my understanding goes. All idolatry is, in reality, self-worship. For the attributes we give to the thing come from us. We create it. We are the creators of that idol. We imbue it with our own attributes. So what are we worshiping? Us. We're idolizing ourselves. So God prohibits this, for that it puts an idol above him. It puts us above him. God is not in his proper place. God is to be worshipped alone, just as Jesus said to the devil, the Lord thy God is to be worshipped, and him alone. Thou shalt have no gods before me. Now let's move to the third commandment. Verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. What does the third commandment prohibit or require? The taking of God's name in vain, right? So what does it mean to take God's name in vain? not using it in an appropriate manner. Very good. I see it as twofold. First, it is for us to understand that God's name is who he is. As expressed in Psalm 111, verse 9. Holy and reverend is his name. When we use God's name in speech, common speech, if we use it lightly or in a profane or common way, we defile it. We bring God down to our level. God is holy. His name is holy because he is holy, and his name is who he is. Remember what he said to Moses? When Moses said, well, whom shall I say sent me unto you? When God was sending him to the Jews to tell them, well, what is the name of their God? He's asking after his name. God says, I am that I am. In other words, I am what I am. Who I am is my name. What you see me do is who I am. That's what makes us who we are too, by the way. It's not this. It's not the hair. It's not the eyes. It's not the body. It's what's in here. What I do is who I am. My character, what you see, that's who you know me to be. So it is with God. His name is holy and reverend, and it should be spoken with reverence. We should not use it lightly or flippantly. We should not use it in oaths. Whenever God's name is invoked, it should be done with solemnity, because in that name is power. As Paul says, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. This is another expression of the third commandment. Paul says, and my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. That is Christianity. When God's name is invoked, it is with power. When the disciples and apostles of old invoked God's name, the dead were raised. The lame were made to walk. The eyes of the blind were opened. In Jesus' name, the dead were brought back to life. God's name is power. God's name is holy and reverend, and it should be invoked with solemnity and reverence. We should veil as it were, our face in humility when we invoke the name of God, because he is God. Let's not use it in a light or flippant way, not using it in a joking way. God's name is holy and reverend, and he will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. The world might see it as a light thing, but God does not. It's one of his commandments. And that brings us to the last of the first table, the fourth commandment, that which has brought us here today. It's found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. God expresses it. He says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So the Sabbath commandment likewise is a twofold commandment. What is the first prohibition? Or I should say command? Remember, okay. That would fit, yes. But it's not what I'm looking for. Remembrance is important. That's why we're here. But the first command, aside from remember, no. 6 days shalt thou labor. We often overlook that fact. God did not only prohibit work upon the Sabbath, but he required labor on all the other 6 days. 6 days shalt thou labor. Idleness is breaking the fourth commandment. Idleness during the week is breaking the fourth commandment. God said, 6 days shalt thou, that's a command, labor, and do all thy work. So God gave us 6 days, and in those 6 days, we are to provide for our needs, the needs of our family, any extended family we may have. That is a requirement of the fourth commandment. Man that does not provide for his house is an infidel, says God. He is an unbeliever. The fourth commandment requires us to labor. That's the first part of it. Labor on those 6 days. The second part is a prohibition of labor upon the seventh. Not of labor in totality, but of our labor. Thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, thy daughter, manservant, maidservant, cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates. You are to make sure that all under your roof are obeying the law of God by not doing their own labor. The law of the fourth commandment, the Sabbath law, is a requirement to labor and is a prohibition of labor upon the seventh day, the day wherein God rested from all his work. It was to stand forever as the sign of a completed work. It stands to us as a promise of what God will do. God will complete his work. His work of restoration of the soul will be completed just as surely as the creation of the earth was completed in 6 days. The Sabbath is the sign of that. God rested on the seventh day. His work was done. Nothing was out of place. Everything was perfect and in order. And so it will be. And we keep the Sabbath as a remembrance of that. God's promise. God will complete that which he has begun. And he has begun a good work in you. And he will complete it. God promises that. But the Sabbath is more than just a requiring to work on the first 6 days and a prohibition of our work on the seventh day. It is also a distinction. The Sabbath draws a distinction. Notice the language in Ezekiel 22, verse 26. God speaking of the priests, those who were given to explain his law, to be exemplars of his law, to represent Christ. He says of them, her priests have violated my law and have profaned mine holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane or the common. Neither have they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them, that is made common. What were the priests among God's people doing? Violating his law. Yes, they were violating his law, but they were showing no distinction between holy and common, between that which is clean and unclean. And that's what the Sabbath does, you see. Sabbath is about ownership. Who owns this world? God does. Who owns the Sabbath? God does. Who owns the first 6 days of the week? God does, but he gave them to you. So you are free to take care of all your needs upon those 6 days. But the seventh day, God says, is mine. It doesn't belong to you. If you touch it, you're a thief. You're taking what doesn't belong to you. It is mine. It draws a distinction. It is holy. Those first 6 days are not holy. This day is holy. I have pronounced a blessing upon it. I have sanctified it. I have made it holy. And it is holy. It belongs to me. All that belongs to God is holy, is consecrated and holy. The Sabbath belongs to him. It draws that line between that which is common and that which is holy. The first 6 days are common. The Sabbath is holy. By it we draw a distinction. We show the difference between the holy and the profane by the observance of the Sabbath, by keeping it holy. Not as the world keeps the Sabbath, not as many Seventh-day Adventists keep the Sabbath, but by remembering, by keeping it holy, by being reverent, by remembering, by showing reverence to God, by coming together and thinking upon what He has done for us, rehearsing His works unto each other. We show reverence to God. We show the difference between holy and profane. By ceasing from our own works, from thinking our own thoughts, from letting our mind dwell upon those things that we love to do upon that day, and thinking upon heavenly things, thinking upon God's word, thinking upon what He has done. We draw a distinction, and our life will show that distinction. It will show the divide between light and darkness, between clean and unclean, between holy and profane. That's what the Sabbath is there to do. It deals with ownership. When something doesn't belong to you, you respect that. And the Sabbath is to be respected in the same way. And that brings us to the second table. There's much more we could say about the Sabbath, but we're going to cease for the moment. We're going to move to the second table of the law. We're going to look at man's love to man, how we relate to our fellow man. And that's what the second table deals with. And we begin with the foundation of the second table, just as we began with the first commandment, laying the foundation of the laws regarding to God. The fifth commandment lays the foundation of our relation to all men. It is found in verse 12, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." What does the fifth commandment require? Honor. To whom? Parents, yes. You see anything more? Who are our parents? Are they older than us? Yes, they are. Do they have authority over us? Yes. It's an understanding of that principle. Why do we honor our parents? You ever thought about that? Why do we honor our parents? They gave life to us. Through them we were created. We owe our life to them. Because of that, we are to honor them. But it goes beyond this. Proverbs 1, verse 7. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Honoring our parents is honoring God. Our parents have authority over us because God gave them authority over us as children. And those who have children have authority over their children because God gave them authority over their children. The fifth commandment is an understanding of authority. It's how we relate to one another. That's the foundation. It lays that foundation. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of that knowledge. God is to be feared above all. We recognize His authority in our parents. That's why we obey them. Because it is not their authority, it is God's authority. We recognize that authority in government officials. Those institutions and governments which we have created have been instituted with authority that God has given to us, that we have bestowed upon those individuals. We recognize that authority not as issuing from men, but as issuing from God. That is why we recognize it. And the fifth commandment lays that foundation, is the recognition of all authority as deriving from God alone. It is the fear of the Lord. And when that is lacking, society crumbles. It is the foundation of all society, and society is built on man's relation to man. That's why the fifth commandment lays that foundation, because without it, there cannot be society. It is every man for himself. And that leads to a flood. Romans 13:7. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. That is the way of man to man. That is how we deal with one another. Any that is out of harmony with this is out of harmony with God. We are to render tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear is due. We show respect unto rulers, those who are placed in positions of authority. When the policeman pulls us over, we show respect for that authority. When we enter into the presence of the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of another country or their representative body of elected officials, we show respect because that represents God's authority. And God will hold them accountable to how they use it, but we must show fear for the authority itself because that issues from God. And if we show disrespect for that authority, we show disrespect for God. We break the fifth commandment. The sixth commandment. Verse 13. Thou shalt not kill. One of the shortest of commandments. A prohibition against what?
Murder.
We call it murder? Yes. Notice it says thou. Is God prohibiting himself? No. Who is he prohibiting? You and me. We shall not take justice into our own hands. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will requite. I will give justice. That is God's work, not man's. Now, when it comes to government, governments are imbued with authority, so they must execute the laws of the land. That is required. Yes. And when there are laws regarding certain things that have death penalty, well then governments are authorized to execute those laws to maintain its society, to maintain honor and purity and justice and goodness and morality within society. Those things must be done. The prohibition is the individual taking that upon himself. When we have a vigilante spirit. Matthew 5, verses 21 and 22, Jesus touches on the root of this command. He says, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. So Jesus here is quoting from their law. He quotes the commandment which was added to by the Jewish law, that whosoever would kill will be in danger of the judgment. But what does Jesus say? What is he touching upon here? Where does killing begin? Anger, yes. Not just anger, but anger without a just cause. When we are angry without a just cause, we have murdered our brother in our heart. And it begins, Jesus touches on the beginning of it. Notice what he says. Whosoever shall say unto his brother, Raca. Well, what is Raca? It's name calling. Whenever you call somebody a name, you have entered upon the path of murder. Name calling is contempt. It shows contempt. You are belittling someone. You are raising yourself and lowering them. It is hatred in the heart. It's belittling. It's lowering them. It's one of the first steps on the path of murder. The lower a person gets, the less human they get. And that is what justifies us in our mind of taking the life. That's how it begins, when we lessen them, step by step by step. And that begins with name calling. And thou fool is the worst name you can call somebody. An infidel, an unbeliever, an hater of God. When we call people by these kinds of names, any kind of name that is belittling, whether we say it in a lighthearted jest or not, name calling is the first step on the path of murdering your brother. And it begins in the heart. And it is a sign of contempt and anger in the heart toward an individual. Contempt is a form of anger. And that is a prohibition of the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not kill. Not only are we not to take justice into our own hands, we are not to hold bitterness, anger, resentment, or any ill will toward our fellow man in our heart. Because if we do, it will result in murder. We may not have the opportunity, but God looks as if we have. And he will judge us as though we have. The seventh commandment, Exodus 20, verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. This is a prohibition against what?
Cheating.
Adultery, we use it in common language, cheating, yes. But adultery is literally mixing. When a man and woman come together, they become what? One. One, unbroken. Anything that comes in between that is adultery. Anything mixed in is adultery. Adultery is not simply fornication. God is not here simply prohibiting the physical act of fornication. He's prohibiting all that comes in between you and your husband or wife. Anything that divides that is adultery. It's an admixture. You're adding to that. You start showing more affection for somebody else than you do for your husband. That's adultery. That affection, that love, that devotion belongs to them. Period. You swore it before God. And God will hold you to that. That is one of his commandments. Marriage is sacred, and God touches on it in his 10 commandments. He forbids anything that divides what he has brought together. And that includes our relationship to him. Matthew 5, 27 and 28, Jesus touches on this as well. We often use this in relation to men because Jesus focuses on men, but it relates to both sexes. He says, ye have heard that it was said by them of old, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Now this, as it applies to men, we tend to do it visually. We tend to be physical creatures. We're attracted by physical sight. But women are different. This commandment prohibits anything that draws the affection away. If you're lusting after another man's car or another woman's house or another woman's possessions, that also is a form of adultery. Any emotional affection that is drawn away toward another is adultery. Jesus is touching on it all. Just because it doesn't have to do with physical lust does not mean it is not adultery. Anything that breaks that union, that divides what God has brought together, is adultery. For men, it tends to be physical lust. But for women, it is different. Jesus happens not to touch upon that. But it doesn't deny that. Adultery is not a man problem. Adultery is a human problem. And we need to recognize this. It exists equally on both sides. Isaiah 29:13. Now this is my translation of the Greek in that text. Isaiah 29:13. It says, "And the Lord has said, this people draw nigh to me with their mouth, and they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching the commandments and doctrines of men." That is adultery. That is adultery. When we teach the fear of God through the commandments of men, we are adulterating it. We're adding in. We've brought another into that relationship, you see. That is adultery. And it's the same in any relationship. The relationship between husband and wife, God instituted in the Garden of Eden, together with the Sabbath. Both of them had beginnings before sin. And they were holy and pure. And God says to keep them that way. Jesus said that divorce was not initial. It wasn't permitted initially. God permitted it through Moses because of the hardness of human hearts. Jesus says, in the beginning it was not so. He says, therefore, let not man divide that which God has brought together or united in one. That was his purpose. But sin has destroyed that to a large degree. And that's what the law deals with. Sin. The 8th commandment. Much more we could say about all of these, but we're going to move on. Commandment number 8. Thou shalt not steal. What is God prohibiting here? Taking stuff that's not yours. And you can see in this how they connect to each other. You see how this relates to the Sabbath? How it relates to honoring father and mother? There is an interconnection between all the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. John 10, verse 1. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a what? How is Jesus applying this? Any other way to God but through Jesus is thievery. Anything that enters the heart and takes the heart away from God, takes away its affections, its love, its devotion, is thievery. It is robbery. Not only is God prohibiting us taking what doesn't belong to others, that belongs to one of our neighbors, but God is also prohibiting the principle behind it. What belongs to him? Everything. All that is in our heart. And when we withhold that, we are stealing. We're robbing. Jesus said, the thief and the robber tries to find another way. We're looking to alternate ways to salvation that aren't so hard, that don't require this. We're robbers. We're thieves. We're trying to steal. Jesus said, he that does not enter by the door, he is the door. The same as a thief and robber. Matthew 25, verse 18. But he that had received one, that is 1 talent, speaking of the parable of the talents, but he that had received the one went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. Whose talent was it? The Lord's. Who's given you your talents? What are you doing with them? Are you building them? Are you improving them? Are you multiplying them? Because if you're not, you're going to receive the same condemnation as this man who went and hid his Lord's money and didn't improve it. If the gifts God has given you for his glory are not being improved, you're a thief, said Jesus. That is the 8th command. All who do not improve upon that which the Lord has invested upon them, Jesus says, are thieves. They're unfaithful stewards. They have robbed God of his due. Exodus 20, verse 16, the ninth commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. What is this a prohibition of? Yes, I would agree. Gossip, absolutely. It is a prohibition against lying, falsehood. But what kind of falsehood specifically? That which affects our neighbor. That's right. When we bear false witness against them, when we misconstrue the facts, or we say the truth, but we say it in such a way to condemn them or to make them look bad, that is the breaking of the ninth commandment. It's bearing false witness. You can do it with the truth, but how the truth is presented, that's important too. Remember, we are not to bear false witness against our neighbor. And if we are using the truth and we're misconstruing it, we're warping it or wresting it or making it appear as though it is not the way it is in reality. Anything that lessens our guilt and magnifies someone else's guilt is bearing false witness against our neighbor. Peter said, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, speaking of Paul, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also the other scriptures unto their own destruction. Not only do we wrest the scriptures unto our own destruction, but when we wrest the truth, when we pervert it in any way to draw away guilt from ourselves, we are breaking the ninth commandment. Truth is truth. It cuts both ways equally. And when there's acknowledgement of truth, we must acknowledge it all. An omission of it is a lie. Any omission. It's the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. When we bear witness in this country in a court of law. And so it shall be in the judgment in heaven. God is going to look at it all. Any omission, any falsifying, any twisting, any wresting, God will bring to judgment. 1 Peter 2:22, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Speaking of Jesus. What is guile? It's deceit. The word for guile in Greek is doulos. It literally means bait. It represents the hook. Have you ever thought what a hook is? How do you make a hook? You take something straight and you bend it. Unbent, it won't catch anything. But bent, it does. Bent, it's deceitful. And that's when we do with the truth as we do with the hook, we are guile. Guile is in our mouth. When we're twisting, warping, bending the truth, we're creating deceit. And that's how God views it. And that brings me to the last commandment. Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. Perhaps one of the most important, because it deals with all of the last six. Exodus 20, verse 17. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, and here is expressed perfectly, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. God could have gone on and on and on and on and on what not to covet, but he simply says, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. And what is covet? What is coveting? Anyone know?
Desire for yourself.
That's right. To desire, period. If you desire something that is not yours, that is the first step to stealing. It's the first step often to murder. It's the motive behind so many offenses toward our fellow man. Coveting. Coveting is a dangerous thing. Where does coveting begin? Philippians 4, verse 11. Paul says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. That is the key to happiness. It is the key to peace. It is the key to tranquility. Being content with what you have. The moment you begin to want what you don't have, you begin to covet. If you're not content with it, it'll lead you to unlawful, unethical ambitions. What God has given you, you're content with it. And God may choose to give you more if you're faithful with what you have. He may increase you, just as he did with Abraham, because Abraham was faithful. Abraham was not ambitious in a bad sense. He was simply content with what he had, and God multiplied it. And he grew. He was faithful. And God will do the same to you if you are faithful. God knows what you can handle. He will give you little or he will give you much, depending upon what your ability is, what your mindset is. But if you're content, you will receive God's blessing. Be assured of it. But the moment discontent enters the heart, covetousness takes over the heart. Hebrews 13:5. Paul states it this way also. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he that hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. God hath said, I will not abandon you. God will provide for us. Jesus said in 14:6, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. God has promised, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Do you think he will abandon you? Not provide for you? That is the beginning of discontent. When you forget that, become unmindful of that, discontentment sets into the heart, and that creates covetousness. That's why the 10th commandment is so important. We must learn to be content, whatsoever state we're in, poverty or riches, wealth or whatever it may be. Be content therewith. Be happy with what God has given you. Be faithful with it. Just as those who received the 5 talents and he that received the 2 talents, they were faithful. They went out and worked with what God had given them, and God multiplied it and blessed them. And they came back with double what God had given them. God blessed them. It wasn't their efforts that secured it. It was God's blessing upon it, their faithfulness. And so it will be with each and every one of us. If we are faithful with what God has given to us and content to be wherever God would have us to be, we will reside in his blessing. But the moment that ceases to be, the moment discontentment sets into the heart, covetous takes over. So these are the 10 commandments. And I hope that we can see that they're much broader than just the surface shows. And I've only touched on just the surface. There's much, much more depth to the law. It behooves us to consider it more than we do. I think more sermons should be given to preaching on understanding the law, that we can walk before God in purity of heart, in purity of conscience. God wants us to understand what he requires of us. And the only way we can do that is by understanding his law, what his requirements are. And God will unfold to us the rich depths that are there. We've only looked at just the beginning today. But I hope it will be an inspiration and incentive to you to go back and open the Bible and look at those 10 commandments again. And God will give you more. God will open to you an understanding of what he requires of you as an individual from his law. Because what I tell you, take it with a grain of salt. But God will open to you what he requires of you individually. And that's what I hope will come of this today, that every one of us will go to God individually, open his word and say, Lord, what is it that thou dost require of me today? Help me to understand what thou wouldst have me to do.